Well, as some of you heard a while back, Amy and I had a vacation week at the end of August, beginning of September. And one of the places we visited was the Grand Canyon. I had bit the bullet and bought a nice camera to take with me on this trip out west. And there we were at the Grand Canyon, and I had my nice camera around my neck, and I was walking along and took a ton of pictures. Didn't take long, however, to notice that just about everybody else had their nice camera around their neck, too. It was almost like this macho thing all the guys had, you know? Some people even had like 2 bags strapped around them with different cameras and then a bunch of lenses. And you know, those lenses can get big. Well, and when we got home, I looked at those pictures and I found one I liked, and I put it on my computer screen as the background on the home page. And it's a fairly large-sized screen, and there it was. Kind of an impressive looking picture. You know, it's hard to take a picture of the Grand Canyon that doesn't look impressive. Well, in this picture, we were standing on the edge, on the path. So you look out over this vast expanse of the canyon itself. And then I noticed, I didn't even realize it at the time, but to the right, a little down the pathway, it kind of curved outward, there were about 4 or 5 people standing there. And they looked like little ants compared to the vastness of Grand Canyon. And then in the sky, which was a sunny day, the blue sky, but yet there had come this big old dark gray cloud over the canyon. And then out on the right side, out of that cloud came a beautiful little rainbow that kind of extended down into the canyon. Well, when I was focusing on our biblical lesson for today that I just read, I thought about that picture on my computer screen. Here is Jesus teaching the crowd and uses the scribes and the Pharisees to make a point. Listen to their teaching because they're authority, but do not imitate their behavior because they are hypocrites. They do not practice what they teach. They like to rub their authority in your faces and call themselves rabbi, teacher. So do not be like them. Do not call yourselves rabbi. Instead, remain as students and remember that I am the teacher and our subject is God. In modern day terms, we might say that the church is the school, the Bible is the textbook, and God is the subject we are studying and learning about. So, how come that lesson makes me think of the photograph of the Grand Canyon? Well, consider the canyon itself. I think if Jesus had seen the Grand Canyon, he might have made a parable out of it. The kingdom of heaven is like the Grand Canyon. God is like the Grand Canyon in some ways. God is vast. You know, you can't see into the depths of God, and you can't see into the broadness of God. Even the Grand Canyon, you have to drive a long way from one end to the other. You cannot see from one end to the other. And you cannot even see all the way down to the bottom except in 1 or 2 little teeny tiny places. It's so multi-layered and windy, and it's just beyond our ability to see the canyon as a whole or to know what all it represents. And like God, the canyon is beautiful. The colors, the shadings of colors, the different colors, how they're put together. And the colors are mixed with these wonderful, unique shapes, spires. And then when you can walk 100 yards one way or the other and you get almost an entirely different picture. Like the canyon, God is beautiful too. God's beauty is a spiritual beauty. It is the beauty of love, justice, forgiveness, and salvation. And the canyon is mysterious, just as God is mysterious. You know, we have some scientific theories about how the Grand Canyon was formed. And maybe there's some truth in some of those theories. Maybe there's some truth in some of the evidence, but nonetheless, imagine how long it took. And the most amazing thing is how it ended up being so utterly beautiful. It is mysterious, and so is God. Whenever we think we've got a handle on God, and now God serves us rather than we serving God, boy, oh boy, we need to have the sense of mystery restored in our life. Well, then, another part of that photograph was those little handful of people over there to the right. And that's like us. Like the crowd listening to Jesus teaching. And we're sort of a paradox. Here we are, just little ant-like creatures, almost nothing in comparison even to the vastness of the Grand Canyon. And yet, God has put into our hearts and minds in creation this amazing ability to be creatures who seek God and who get little glimpses of portions of God in their life. We see way beyond just in front of our feet or in front of our noses. We have the vision of God's glory in our minds and hearts. Then there's the dark cloud. And that sort of makes me think of the scribes and Pharisees, the hypocrites who did not practice what they taught. And what's the harm in that? It hurt people. And Jesus made that clear. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on the shoulders of others, but they're not willing to do one thing about it. And you know, the rest of that passage, the rest of the chapter actually, is a whole series of woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, and he listed a whole lot of reasons. And here's one of them. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint, dill, and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. It is these you ought to have practiced, without neglecting the others. And of course they had a deep need to be admired, and they had to wear the best clothes, and they had to sit at the best places, and everyone was supposed to think how great they were. You know, I just could not help. It's almost like a ready-made illustration, and I've sort of wavered on this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because it's important. You know, we have our examples of modern-day scribes and Pharisees and some of their not practicing what they teach. And recently it's come out, a man named Paul Manafort, and I'm not saying this in order to somehow trash that man, but his behavior provides a great modern-day illustration for that kind of behavior that Jesus teaches against. You know, he has recently been indicted by the special prosecutor, Mueller. It's all in the news and everybody talks about it. And he's been indicted for money laundering millions of dollars through false companies in other lands to get into the States. Of course, you don't pay taxes on that. And you know, the thing is, and here's the illustration, and this is all public record now, What did he do with those millions? Well, he bought a mansion in the Hamptons, in the wealthiest part of the Hamptons. And if you live in the wealthiest part of the Hamptons in a big old mansion, you got to have good stuff to put in it. So he bought a rug that cost almost $1 million. And if you live in one of the biggest mansions in one of the wealthiest places on earth, well, you got to look good. So he bought almost $1 million worth of clothes in New York City. And it's almost as if he were sort of living out what Jesus was saying about the scribes and Pharisees. Now, most of us will never have that kind of wealth and that kind of opportunity to give into greed. But we all have to wrestle with greed, and I think most of us can kind of keep it under control. But when it gets out of hand and takes over your life, why, it can be destructive. And Jesus said, the exalted will be humbled. And now that poor man has been humbled before the country. And that's a sad thing. And we should pray for him and his colleague and everyone else who's in trouble. But we don't have to have the place of honor at banquets. We don't have to sit in the best seats in the synagogues. Instead, we need to be sure, as Jesus wants us to do, to consider the weightier matters of the law. Justice, mercy, faith. Let us make justice, mercy, and faith a part of our life. Well, and then there is the rainbow. And that makes me think about one of the greatest lessons that our teacher, the Christ, teaches us about God. You know, the rainbow goes back to the symbolism associated with the story about Noah and the ark, where God says the rainbow is a sign that God is only going to be for life. And so learning about God includes learning that God is life, and fruitful and abundant life, and not death, and not destructiveness of others. And so, today I was thinking about that in terms of celebrating the lives of the saints and giving thanks for people who did pay attention to the weightier matters, as Jesus put it. And as we remember loved ones, friends, colleagues who have died in this past year, let us remember one of Jesus' greatest lessons, that God is the God of life and light and eternity. And that dark cloud is going to go away. And just remember that the humble will be exalted. Amen.